Hey, welcome back to This Week in Creationism. I'm your host, Joel Duff, and we take a look at the headlines in the world of creationism. But today, special edition. This only has to do with something I ran across last night, stumbled into, and I thought it was interesting enough to talk about it alone. But it also led me down kind of a rabbit trail to find out some new things that I had never looked at. All this has to do with Answers in Genesis, and it all has to do with me going to the Answers in Genesis website to look at the recent headlines, thinking, what should I talk about in the next episode of This Week in Creationism? And I went to the Answers in Genesis website, but it was broken. The AIG homepage had a malfunction, and a very interesting malfunction is that I'm going to show you what I saw and how that led me to think about some other things that I have never talked about with Answers in Genesis before. So we're going to talk creation apologetics courses, accreditation, and onboard training at Answers in Genesis, all of which I discovered when AIG had a homepage malfunction last night. Okay, we got that coming up. Yeah, everything I'm going to show you right now comes from what apparently was a very short time frame glitch on the Answers in Genesis website. I just happened to be there, right place, right time. Clicking on the Answers in Genesis homepage, I was actually perusing Institutes for Creation Research, creation.com, and I was doing my semi-weekly check on Answers in Genesis. I went to the Answers in Genesis homepage, and this is what I saw. You are seeing the front page of the Answers in Genesis website right here. This is my screenshot of it. And I'm showing you the search bar there, right? It says answersingenesis.org. That is their address. And I even confirmed that this is the same address that I always use by simply opening up another tab, typing in answersingenesis.org again, and I did not see what you're seeing here right now. So somewhere in their HTML, some lines got mixed. Maybe they're doing a refresh, they're updating something, and something got spliced in there wrong. And instead of directing me to the homepage of Answers in Genesis, I was directed to what I found out later is really, I think it's education.answersingenesis.org, which is a more hidden site, behind the scenes type of thing that involves their different educational training that they provide. And so what you're seeing here is the Answers Education online. And I am seeing myself as I'm just seeing the front page of this educational system. And so let me just go down the types of things that I saw on this front page. All right, so what there was is a list of all the different kinds of courses that they have available for online training, right? Courses you can take to learn creation apologetics. So for example, you see here, critical thinking. This is CAP, stands for Creation Apologetics. So Creation Apologetics, course 110, Fundamentals of Creation Apologetics, Applying Creation Apologetics to Science, creation apologetics and biology, creation apologetics and geology. All these are different courses. Now you can find these on underneath the education link on Answers in Genesis website. They don't look like anything like this, right? Because they're the front forward facing sort of glamour shots of what these courses are and trying to the sales pitch. Here you're seeing the guts of behind the scenes, the course system. So you have, but where it gets interesting here is we find out foundations in creation apologetics, AIG volunteers. So here seeing like their training modules, right? You're going to be a volunteer. You're going to need to, before you can come volunteer, you need to score a certain number of points or show that you've actually gone through this different modules. And what you do, so if you open this up, you'll find is there's, a whole bunch of different videos you need to watch. Then there's little short quizzes to test you on whether you've done that. I've done a lot of these things in my own at my own business, and many of you probably have as well. You have to go through various training modules, right? So this is the training module for making sure that everyone understands that we're how to be on the same page if you're a volunteer at Answers in Genesis. AIG editorial and content tests. All right, so and you'll see the subtitle there, editorial and content tests for AIG candidates pursuing jobs that invoke writing and editing. Okay, so here's a module you take in terms of our expectations for, well, maybe it's an actual testing making you do writing to see what they think of your writing, but it's also to inform anyone who wants to write for Answers in Genesis. Here are our expectations. Here are the kind of rules you have to follow, and I'm sure that includes the type of content you can talk about, but also, the use of certain words and common language usage that makes all their content very similar and similar sounding. All right, and you keep going and going and going. This is a really long list of all the different educational modules they have. So I'm looking at this front page. I'm kind of scrolling down it. I took these screenshots, right? And here we go with counterfeit of Christianity, and then I missed one right here. The most interesting one to me was Creation Apologetics Masterclass, and the COVID-19, I assume, is COVID-19. So this is a course in which they took all 6 of their most popular courses, bundled them all together into what's called a masterclass, sort of for during the pandemic. Hey, you've got nothing else to do. You're stuck at home. You could be taking the apologetics masterclass. And for some of these, I clicked on all these links to open into different tabs to see what I could see. Some of them just direct me to a login page, but many of them took me to that particular course and then showed me the outline of that particular course. I'm going to show you a little bit of that from here. Right. So one interesting little tidbit too, another thing that kind of surprised me is like here I am sort of in the back end of their website, and I'm seeing the courses. But then when I click on a particular course and I go in and I can see in more detail, like here's all the requirements for the course, right? Here's the content management system is what this is for what it's going to walk any student through. But when I go and do that, it's as if it's actually logging me into the system. And what I have is I have it blacked out right there, but there's a person's name right there. And I don't know who that is, but it sounds like it's a particular person's profile that I am now associated with after clicking on this link that was on their front page when I just searched for answersingenesis.org. And so here I am in this person's page, for this particular class. And now I'm seeing, okay, well, here's your course management system, right? Here's a tutorial for how to take this course, how to take a quiz and so forth. That's the way my class begins. I have an introductory material module, right, which all the students have to look at, and then they have to have viewed a certain amount of that material, actually checked off that they've read it before they're allowed to move on to the next module and see the next bit of material. It's the same kind of setup they have here. So for example, looking at the Creation Apologetics Masterclass from COVID-19. So it starts out with apologetics, and it's actually a 42 module course, and 42 separate modules, each of which they suggest should take several hours to complete, because there really are a lot of videos and a lot of reading material that you're required to take. And then there's there's actually one main quizzing component at the end. You have to score to a certain degree of accuracy in order to be able to move on to the next module. So here's what some of that looks like. So here's the general course information from the Creation Apologetics Masterclass. Now, none of this stuff was like revelatory to me in the sense of like, I know all this material. I'm not surprised that this is the material they would include in these courses. I didn't know the extent to which these courses existed, even though I've looked just briefly at the public-facing page at Answers in Genesis. But what I did find intriguing, and what I think you might find interesting if you're not familiar with Answers in Genesis and sort of how they operate. Well, let me show you the type of material that's in these modules. Let me give you a feel for like what is the educational level that they're kind of getting at in these courses. So here we have, again, this masterclass is 42 modules. Here's module number 11, the origin of species. And so I have the list of all the different modules and then all the learning outcomes or lesson goals in each of those. So here you have like, what are you responsible for doing? Well, you got to watch all these videos, take notes, prepare for the quiz, read all the articles, take some notes, prepare for that quiz, and then of course take the quiz. That's your main priorities as a student. What are your lesson goals? Like, what are they hoping that you will achieve as an outcome of having taken this? Well, in this case, describe the scientific problems with the naturalistic theory of the origin of life. Explain why natural selection supports biblical creation. Interesting, huh? right? Because Answers in Genesis is very much a supporter of the central concept of natural selection within their particular view of the origin of species. All right. And then they go as far as saying, like, explain how natural selection refutes evolution. And so those are your learning objectives and outcomes from taking this particular module number 11. And so what are you going to do? You're going to watch the video with Darwin Wright by Mortensen. That's 67 minutes. You're going to watch a video by Georgia Purdom. I've seen that video on natural selection. It's very simple. I've actually shown that. Honestly, I've actually shown that to one of my classes as an exercise in my class. But it's more like name. Let's find. Can you find three things that are that Georgia Purdom gets wrong in this particular video? And so it's a way of testing students to see whether they actually understand natural selection by looking at somebody who doesn't describe natural selection very well. So I'm familiar with all the materials that are mentioned here. I don't. What I find interesting about these courses is there's really nothing in these courses that it's like that I've seen that seems to be intentionally made for the course. Somebody has organized the content, but they're just a content manager. And the content is already all on Answers in Genesis website. Like everything is pulled from videos and articles that are on Answers in Genesis website, right? So the next thing you would do is you'd read the article, Can Natural Selection Proceed? Explain the origin of life. And then there's some key ideas that you would get from that particular paper. And then you would read an article, Is Natural Selection the Same Thing as Evolution? Of course, that's Georgia Purdom's sort of big thing, is trying to say that they're somehow not correlated or related to one another. And then there's the Jeanson and Purdom article, Understanding Natural Selection, which is a little bit more of a journal type article, a little bit more in depth there. Honestly, the stuff above is really very, very basic stuff. And although, I mean, that's kind of what this course is about. It's a apologetics master class, but really you're mastering the basics, in terms of basics of creation science and what you should know about creation science. Well, flipping all the way down, a very, very long list, all the way down to module 41, the last module. There's two modules at the end called Challenging Ideas. And so students are supposed to try to grapple with some, like, what are some more difficult concepts in creation, or things that creationists have difficulty understanding. And one of those, like, so for example, here, understand the unique qualities of Earth, which allow life to flourish even after the fall. So how did organisms propagate and speciate so rapidly and so quickly after the fall, when wasn't the world just completely destroyed, just like a big giant muddy mess afterwards? Like how would you explain that? Explain why Christians should not always look for a concrete answer to explain supernatural astronomical events in history. So kind of like the question of, when do you explain something by miracle, and when should you be allowed to try to explain something by naturalistic processes? And this is something that young Earth creationists really do grapple with a lot, because there are many times where they are working really hard to find naturalistic explanations, like how did all the organisms fit on the ark, and how did they migrate after the ark, and all that. They don't employ supernatural explanations for those things. Rarely do they ever do that. They're applying naturalistic explanations to most things about the world around us. Recognize that God's word is true and the historical record is accurate, even when mankind cannot explain it. That's really an admission that here are some things that creationists can't explain naturalistically. It seems like this is really difficult to explain. How does this fit? What happens when you get to points where things don't fit? Well, understand that God's word is still true and the historical record is accurate. So as long as you're interpreting the Bible correctly, it should be able to tell you the truth, whether or not you can't actually explain it in terms of other types of evidence. Then recognizing the limitations of creatures to comprehend and explain the creator and his actions. And I understand why this particular module is at the end. It's sort of like, okay, we went through all these things. We have all these explanations, right? Answers in Genesis. We have all these answers. But I suspect that there are people in the back of their minds came up with a bunch of questions as they went through the modules. You can't help, anyone who's inquisitive is going to ask a lot of really interesting questions. And by the way, these are all, they're guided lessons, but not guided in the sense that you have an instructor there, like helping you out. The instructor is just the content management system. And these are all on your pace, do it your own type of thing right here. So there's very little there's no face-to-face time, and there's little chance for actually interaction with an instructor. So really, this is their chance to sort of like, try to paper over, hey, you got a lot of questions. Don't worry, even if you have questions and you can't explain something, here are some ways you can like cognitively like deal with this, right? You can deal with it by simply recognizing that we're limited as finite creatures. And therefore, it's okay if you don't understand something because God doesn't necessarily reveal everything, and someday we'll find everything out. Now, I'm saying that somewhat, you probably hear a little sarcasm in my voice, and but those of you who know me well know that I think there's elements of truth in all these types of things, and I would employ some of these arguments myself. I just think that Answers in Genesis employs them as over the top and as sort of devices, safety devices for themselves, and don't allow. Basically, what it does is it allows them to not challenge themselves, and allows other people not to challenge them because they have like these get out of jail free cards at their disposal, and that's the last thing they're sort of doing when they're training individuals in this great creation apologetics course. Okay, so now after seeing these things, and I'm just showing you tiny snapshot of what's there. I didn't necessarily have access to everything, but I looked at a lot of the different courses, and to me, as I said, not terribly interesting because I know all that material, and all that material, because every bit of that material is stuff that I've already seen. So it wasn't like there's like, oh, they got like some super secret information here. This is where you can find out like the real answers to the hard questions, right? Now there really aren't hard questions there, and if there are hard questions, here's how you can get out of those hard questions for yourself. It's like, so it's like there's no more depth, in these courses than you're going to find on the Answers in Genesis website. However, you can go to the Answers in Genesis website, and if you go under education and you look at online courses, they have all these different courses. And this is, I just showed you the back end of those online courses. Um, and so, for example, creation apologetics and biology, which I was particularly interested in, I took a look at a few pages from that. Maybe I'll show that. All right. So here we have, we're going to take this online module style online course. So you can walk and deepen your understanding of the integrity and authority of Scripture. And in this 7-lesson course or 7-module course, we'll teach you how to defend the biblical account of creation in the area of biology. And so how might you do that? What do you have to do to take this? I mean, any one of you could do this if you want, right? Because you could pay $29. And that's the option with continuing education units, which is just a name to make it sound nice. Or you could pay $39, and that includes the fee for continuing unit processing. All right, so they take care of the details in terms of getting you credit for this course. You might like, well, credit? What's the credit for in a course like this? What's this credit going to do for me? These courses can be taken by high school teachers and so forth who need to have continuing education credits, all right, to maintain their licenses. And but in particular, they're taken by teachers who are teachers at Christian schools. All right, and so they're ACSI, which I'll show you in just a moment. Teachers who pass these courses can receive 2.33 ASCI accredited continuing education credits. All right. And so for $39, you can take the course. If you pass it, they'll process your credits with the institution. With ACSI, and then eventually your institution will see that you have been updating your knowledge, right? And so they're providing this to the community of it. This is science education, right? So if you're a science teacher at a Christian school, this is a way you can get essentially master's level credit. This is beyond bachelor's degree. So you're supposed to get master's level sort of type of courses in order to continue your education. All right, so what's this ASCI thing? Oh, sorry, got ahead of myself. What are the goals of this particular course? All right, so looking at the biology one. I'm a biologist, so I'm going to go to the biology one just because I'm more familiar with it. So upon completing this course, what will students be able to do? What will these teachers be able to do with their students who they've now learned this material from Answers in Genesis? They'll be able to state basic concepts behind genetics, mutations, and natural selection, recognize alleged evolutionary relationships and the evidence that is claimed to support them. Something about that. I saw a bunch of stuff about phylogeny in there. explain mutations with respect to DNA and genetic information, refute the claim that mutations are the raw material for evolution of life on Earth, relate the process of natural selection to speciation. So there again is the connection between, yes, we believe in speciation, and natural selection is one of the drivers of that. Because why? Because it's been observed in nature. So um, identify the icons of evolution and critically analyze how they're misused to convince people of the fact of evolution, and relate the history of evolutionary theory to culture and society. Right. So beyond sort of learning some basics of genetics, mutations, and natural selection, which still has a heavy taint of like focusing that towards sort of the apologetics questions in creation. This really is an apologetics course. It's very much focused around how to defend your faith, not really a learning science type of thing. There's sort of like some science facts sprinkled in. All right, so back to what is ACSI if you've never heard of them. Well, ACSI is the Association for Christian Schools International, and you can think of that they're an accrediting body for Christian schools, right? So like I work at a university, and we just got visited in the last couple of weeks by the Higher Learning Commission. So that's an accrediting body for a large number of public institutions or public colleges and universities. And what they do is they come in and they have a whole checklist of things they would like to see at a higher learning institution, both in terms of the content that's being taught, not specifically what content is actually being taught, but that you're actually progressing on achieving the learning goals you've set for yourself in terms of what students should be learning. But they're also going to assess the environment there, and like the faculty, and relationship with the administration, the amount of input that faculty have, how they're assessed, like, how am I assessed in my job? And they're going to look at those assessments and so forth as a whole bunch of different measures for the quality institution. And they're going to say, you've met all these things. And by doing that and accrediting the university, they're basically saying to students who come to the university, there's a certain minimum bar of expectations that will be met, in your education through that. And so there's these things exist for high schools and so forth, right? As ways of assuring it's a checks and balances system to be able to say, like, if you are a parent, you're going to send your kid to a school, and all you have is hearsay about the school. If you have an accreditation, you at least have some. You can go to the accrediting agency, look at what their minimum expectations are, what their expectations are of the school, and you can get some idea of what that school must at least be somewhat like, and see if they're accredited or whether they're on the naughty list of accreditation, which means, there are many institutions which are on the, you're not passing at this point, right? And so you have X number of warnings and so forth before your accreditation will be pulled, and you might want to know whether an institution is failing on various different aspects of their accreditation. All right, so that's what this is for Christian schools, and this is the largest group of accreditors. There's actually multiple accrediting societies, and just like there is in public schools and so forth, there are different groups different organizations that do accreditation, and they're not all the same in terms of like the quality, right? Their expectations. And so you may hear about diploma mills or something like that with colleges, where really yeah, they confer degrees relatively easily. You pay the fees and you do some minimal amount of work, and they'll give you a degree. Kind of like Kent Hovind's PhD. All right, that's not from an accredited college, right? And it's not accredited because either they never tried to get accredited, or if they tried to get accredited, they didn't get accreditation even from um, a, 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 a Christian accreditation organization. Now, of course, there are organizations that accredit, but the quality of their accreditation is very suspect, because people will also look at the places that have been accredited and say, that's a bunch of crappy education right there, right? So I don't trust, it's just because another school says, we're also accredited by that same group, it kind of taints all the other schools as well, right? Which is why comes a time where they're going to cut off your accreditation, because other schools don't want other schools to get accredited if they're really not meeting standards, right? Okay, this is a lot of talk about accreditation, and you might be wondering why. And I actually am building up toward a point. So I'm looking at, so I was at ACSI, And actually, I looked at my kids' school. My kids go to a Christian school, and it is an ACSI accredited school. And I wasn't surprised by that. It's kind of typical that way. But then I went down to Cincinnati, or just below Cincinnati, in Kentucky. Now, if you don't know it, Answers in Genesis runs a Christian school. A couple years ago, they started a school called 12 Stones, which now has transitioned to be called Answers. Answers. Well, I can't remember, but it's on the next page, so we'll get to it. So they have Answers in Genesis runs a Christian school, and Ken Ham's made a big deal about that. And I noticed right away that the ACSI, which I would definitely consider to be the highest level of accreditation for Christian, like for a Christian school, the ACSI has the highest standards, right? There are other accrediting bodies, but if you want to be in the top notch of Christian schools with respect to, it's not just quality of education, it's sort of environment, it's a bunch of different factors, right, that go into it. But if you want to be at that highest level, then you need ACSI accreditation. And I noticed right away that even though it's been around for several years, Ken Ham School is not ACSI accredited. Now, so what's interesting about that? Hi, what you up to? 10 more minutes. Okay, sorry for the distraction. So if so what's interesting about this is that so here Answers in Genesis is promoting the fact that Christian school teachers can take their course, right, and learn all about creation science, and they can get ACSI continuing education credits, to be continue to be high school teachers, science teachers in particular. And yet their own school is not ACSI approved. And I don't know the exact story behind that, but here's what I infer from that. Okay, so we have Answers Academy. That's the name I was trying to come up, right? Formerly known as 12 Stones Christian Academy, and this is their website. And so they're building a biblical word through for Christian education. And if you go to their page and you look at who are their board of directors, who's running this particular school, there you are, Ken Ham. You also see you have Bodhi Hodge or Hodge down there on the advisory board. That is Ken Ham's son-in-law. You also have Renee Hodge, uh, another Hodge, all right, related in a way to Ken Ham. You have Dr. Georgia Purdom, who is one of Ken Ham's favorite PhD scientists that he's hired as a geneticist, and then several others. As one of the teachers is on the board and so forth. All right, and so all these people are related somehow to, well, they're all part of the school, obviously, but they're related to Ken Ham's ministry. So this is fully Answers in Genesis mystery. Um, Now, what they say is on their site, so I'm looking for what's their accreditation? Like, how do they promote themselves as why you can trust us, with your kids? It really comes down to we're Answers in Genesis. We're above, reproach, and we don't really need anyone to look over us, right? That's the takeaway I get from it, right? Because here we have a curriculum review committee that rigorously evaluates Christian textbooks and supplements to see what we should use that best aligns with the philosophy of our school. The curriculum review committee is just a subset of the board of directors and other teachers. They don't have an outside review board, right? That is watching over them and assessing them and comparing them to their peers. And honestly, I'm sure that Ken Ham thinks he has no peers, right? He's come up with a better way to do Christian school, and I'm sure that he thinks that their school's like the most accurate, best school out there. And just a little highlight from this is kind of tangential, but I'm looking through their statement of faith, which is almost a carbon copy of the statement of faith for Answers in Genesis, but statement of faith for the school. And of course, they have this big long section on origins and history, which is not something you would typically find at any of just go visit websites for Christian schools and look up their statement of faith. They're usually going to have some kind of public listing of like, here's what we believe. And they might have some limited section on creation, but often they don't say anything about it at all. And of course, that really upsets Ken Ham because what could be more important than creation, right? And I just highlight this one line because it fits something that I've been saying a lot on different episodes and on my channel here. Under this part about origins, various original life forms are called kinds, were made by direct supernatural creative acts of God. And then down here in the highlight section, only limited biological changes, including mutational deterioration, have occurred naturally within each kind since creation. I find the wording there interesting because this is the first time I've really seen it expressed so simply this way, but mutational deterioration is really just another way of saying genetic entropy. And so they've more and more, jumped on board with this growing idea within creationism that okay, mutations do happen and they do have a strong effect on organisms, but it's all deterioration. And so they're once again they're putting this right into their statement of faith in terms of what they believe. Yeah. So Ken Ham has his own school, and he likes to promote what a great job they're doing with their teaching there. I just found it interesting and I wouldn't have even looked into this if I hadn't stumbled upon this bizarre error that was made on the Answers in Genesis front page for just that brief moment in time when I happened to click on it. Very providential. Um, and by doing that, I then was led to think more about their educational program. And what hadn't really occurred to me, I knew they have a massive book business, right? I mean, they've got warehouses of books and they're a massive seller of educational materials. They have their own um, vacation Bible school literature. They've got their own school literature, and they're coming out with yet some more like Christian school type of stuff books. But now, really, they're digging into and promoting more and developing more of this online stuff. Now, I remember what I was going to say. The thing about the online stuff is you're paying that. What are you paying for? You're paying for the curator. That's all you're paying for, all right? I mean, I guess you're paying also for an official sort of like, yes, I did this type of thing, and another institution can acknowledge that. And but what you're paying for is just somebody who has just organized the information for you. Because as I said before, there's nothing like new here that you couldn't have just found right on the Answers in Genesis website. If you just went to the Answers in Genesis website and then had like 10 different topics you wanted to research and just typed them into their search thing, you would get all the same information. And you would get more than you've been, and all they're doing is just paring it down, saying like, oh, just look at these various things here. So pretty easy educational curriculum to come up with, and then pair it with like, an accreditation type of thing, which they made an agreement with. And then all of a sudden it's like, yes, we can churn out these educational credits. And that there's a lot of teachers who may not want to take something locally. They don't know what to take, and they just need to get these educational credits out of the way. What could be more convenient than something like these online courses, which are way cheaper than, say, taking it at Liberty University? And so they're probably raking in some pretty good dough doing these module-based things, which once they're set up, cost them nothing. I mean, just almost absolutely nothing to do. And the other thing about this whole setup is that it got me thinking about just the types of influence the Answers in Genesis has that maybe many of you aren't aware of. And I wasn't even really aware of some of these types of things that are going on. And I hadn't really thought about the fact that they have their own in-house training. Of course they're going to have Bible studies, they're going to have, new employee introductions and so forth. But I can see that they're developing a lot of modules for basically making sure everybody has the same background, the same teaching, and so forth. This is really what any company would do, but then that's what Answers in Genesis is, right? They are a company, and they're looking for a consistent product, and that consistent product is, whatever Ken Ham says is the product, of the company. And I see that, in the type of literature and the things that they're doing as they're developing these different modules for learning. All right, so that's my strange story about just going to the Answers in Genesis website and saying, oh, what in the world am I looking at here? And you just never know what's going to happen. And I just found that kind of a fun thing to talk about. Hope you enjoyed that. If so, like it, subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back with This Week in Creationism or something else in the near future. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye bye.